Thank you for tuning into part two of our presentation, Understanding the Game of Financial Aid and Admissions. Once again, I am Ed from Principia Prep. On the first part of the presentation, we discuss mostly the admissions portion and how it affects the financial aid and vice versa. Today, we're going to go in depth into the financial aid forms. Once again, if you need help or assistance, we do help out with forms as well as financial aid consultations. Our phone number and email will be located at the end of the presentation. So let's begin part two. When it comes to the financial aid forms, there's about 10 to 12 different forms out there, but most families will only be dealing with between 2 to 3 different forms. The two forms in front of you now are the two basic forms utilized by most colleges. The form on the left is used by every college. It's called the FAFSA form, or the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. The form on the right is the College Board's CSS profile, which is used by some colleges, not all of them. First, we're going to discuss the FAFSA form. When it comes to the FAFSA form, when you're filling out this form, the opening stages of it, or the first time you're even able to fill out the form for your student, is October 1st of the student's high school senior year. Now, when you're filling out the form for junior parents watching today, you'll be utilizing the 2019 taxes. For sophomore parents, you'll be utilizing the 2020 taxes, and for freshman parents, the 2021 tax returns. Now, when you're filling out the FAFSA form is filled out at fafsa.ed.gov, the website you see below. You can also access it through fafsa.gov. The U.S. Department of Education owns both sites. Now, when you're completing this form, you can click on either blue box, the Start Here box underneath the New to FAFSA, or Returning User where it says Login. The first thing you'll want to do is it's going to ask you to create an FS Aid ID. You must create an FS Aid ID for the student and the parent. Either parent, does not matter. But each individual, parent and student, must have an FS Aid ID to first log into the site, second, retrieve your IRS tax information from the IRS site, and third, to sign the form, both student and parent, at the end. Now, when you're completing the IRS transcript, it's important you have this information because since the IRS allows you to upload your taxes directly from the IRS, this essentially tells the college's financial aid offices that your financial numbers are roughly right around 99% correct. So it's the easiest way to complete the form. Now, when you're completing the form, since you're utilizing the username and password, when you create them, please make sure to use personal emails and this person's specific cell phone. So if you're creating the student's FSA ID, use their personal email for the account and their personal cell phone number. Reason you use these two items is because if you forget the password or the username, they will allow you to access the information for the username or password by sending you codes to this cell phone number on file or the email. This is why you do not use a work email or a high school email. Same thing for the parent. Please utilize your cell phone number and your personal email just to make the process easier. Now, when you're filling out the FAFSA form, there's two items that do not go on the form that unfortunately are put on every year by families. First, your primary residence, where you live, the equity in your home goes nowhere on the FAFSA, no asset sections, etc. Second item that does not go on the FAFSA form is the retirement assets, 401ks, IRAs, Roths, etc. None of these items go on the FAFSA form. The only thing that goes on there is checking, savings, investments outside of retirement, as well as second properties. Now let's go on to what happens when you complete the FAFSA form. At the end of the FAFSA form, you'll be given what's known as an expected family contribution number. This is essentially the amount they think you can pay towards the cost of college. This number here, good, bad, or indifferent, does not mean this is all you're paying towards the college cost. In some cases, this is just the starting point. Now, there's 4 parts to the expected family contribution number. I'm going to go over all 4 parts. Now, there's essentially somewhere between 12 to 15 different equations when it comes to the expected family contribution. Now, the expected family contribution number and equation we'll be showing here today is the basic one, which most families fall into. The first 2 parts of the equation are the parent's income and the parent's asset. The second two parts of the equation are the student's income and the student's assets. Now, when it comes to students' assets, any money the student has in their name as far as in a checking account or savings account or any investments they have will be counted at 20%. So if you indicate on the FAFSA form that your student has $1,000 in checking, they'll basically come back and say, based on this factor, your student, i.e. the family, can pay at least $200 towards a college education. Part 2, student's income. When it comes to the student's income, students are allowed to make up to $6,500 before $1 counts. Once they make over that amount, they count it at 50 cents on the dollar. So if your student made $7,000, that essentially means that they will back out $6,500. The $500 remaining, or essentially half of that, $250 will be asked of you to pay towards a student's college education based on the expected family contribution. Part 3, this is where it starts getting a little bit more tricky. When it comes to parents, parents have what's known as an asset protection allowance. The asset protection allowance allows parents to shield some assets in a sense. The way it works is this. The easiest way for me to explain how the asset protection allowance works is for me to give you an estimated number, because this equation has been changed a multitude of times over the last few years. Just assume that your asset protection allowance is roughly around $20,000. So what does that mean? Let's use a quick equation to explain. First, remember your primary home does not count on the FAFSA form, the value of it. Second, your retirement amounts in your accounts do not go on the FAFSA form. So everything else does, the checking, the savings, investments outside of retirement. Now the asset protection allowance, let's just say that the family has $20,000 in the parent's name in a checking account or savings account. If you put that $20,000 on the FAFSA, it does not count towards paying towards college because it matches or is below the asset protection amount allowed to the parents. Let's use a different equation. Let's say the parents have $100,000 of checking, savings, or money in investments outside of retirement. What will happen is you put the $100,000 on the FAFSA in the parent section for assets. They will back out in the equation $20,000 roughly. The $80,000 remaining will be assessed at a rate of 5.6%, which means essentially that if $100,000 was in the parent section, you guys are looking at paying less than $5,000 towards the cost of college. If that same amount was in the student section, as in the student had $100,000, you'd be looking at paying a minimum of $20,000. This is why when everyone talks about not having assets in the student's name, it is a valid point, not all the time, but most of the time. Part 4, parents' income. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky too, because they've changed this equation a bunch of times as well over the last 4 to 5 years. The easiest way for me to explain how they count your income is first to say they're looking at your adjusted gross income. So if you want to utilize a number as far as income, use that number. Now, when it comes to the adjusted gross income, if your adjusted gross income is between $50,000 to $200,000, a rough draft kind of on the back of the napkin kind of equation is assume they want you to pay 20%. I know the formula here says 22 to 47%. But for me to explain that would take a very long time of where the differences are as far as the equation goes. So the easiest thing for me to say is assume a number of 20% of your adjusted gross income. So let's say that you had made $100,000 and you did the IRS retrieval, or you manually put it into the FAFSA, that you made $100,000 during the course of that tax year. That would essentially mean that they expect you to pay $20,000 towards the cost of education. If you had made $150,000, it's $30,000. $200,000, it's $40,000. Once you go above the $200,000, that's when the percentages start increasing. Now, the easiest way to figure out your expected family contribution is not to utilize this calculation, because it would take you a very long time to put numbers together and everything else, and it could get a little complicated. The easier thing to do is go on to College Board. On College Board, they have an expected family calculator. The expected family contribution calculator allows you to play around with the numbers. It allows you to indicate what you want your income to be or not be, or your assets. So it gives you an idea of what the numbers will do as far as changing the expected family contribution based on maybe you making more or making less, or you having more or having less, etc. It's a great tool to utilize before you fill out the financial aid forms. Now, speaking on College Board, that brings us to our second form that some of you may or may not need to fill out. It's called the CSS profile form. Once you log on to the College Board site and you go down a little bit, maybe about halfway down the page, you'll reach this section, the screen you see in front of you here. On the right side, you'll see in bold, CSS profile. You click on that link there and it will begin the process of starting the College Board's CSS profile form. Now, the FAFSA form is required by all schools. The CSS profile form is only required by some schools. There are over 4,000 colleges out there, and only about roughly 300 require the CSS profile. All of them require the FAFSA form. Now, when it comes to this entire process, there's a big difference between the two forms. The FAFSA form is free. The CSS profile has a fee to it, roughly around $26 for the first school, and then $16 for each additional school going forward. Now, when you're filling out the two forms, they both have save buttons. So if you get overwhelmed, hit the save button and come back. The FAFSA form allows you to put up to 10 different colleges on the form when you first send it out. The CSS profile allows a little bit more, but not much more. When you're filling out the two forms, another big difference is the FAFSA form can be submitted. You can go back in, add schools, make changes to your income, your asset, your address, etc. The CSS profile is locked. You can add schools, but you cannot make financial changes to your form. So please take your time. Do not rush with these forms. The CSS profile form also different from the FAFSA in that the FAFSA has around 90 to 95 questions. The CSS profile has, on average, over 400 questions, and it can be added to because at the end, each college gets to ask additional questions. So why are there so many questions? Main reason being the CSS profile form itself wants to know more about you financially. They want to know about your home, when you bought it, how much you bought it for, how much you owe, how much you think it's worth, etc. It will also ask you about the retirement accounts, how much you have in the retirement accounts. It will also go in more depth about the family as far as they want to know the names of siblings, the names of the parents, as well as the jobs they do. They also want to know, as well as from the siblings specifically, what grade level they're in. If you're paying tuition, if you're not paying tuition, how much tuition is, are they staying somewhere at a school, how much is the room and board, etc. They get a lot more in depth. And the reason they do that is because a CSS profile form is used to provide the school's own institutional aid. And then when they provide institutional aid, they're a lot more generous because these colleges are typically the ones that have more money available to provide. That being said, let's say that you're a little bit nervous about the cost of the school and you're not certain if you want to fill out these forms because they may or may not hinder you based on the questions they're asking you. What can you do? Especially if you're considering early decision, the binding admissions process we had discussed in the first part of the presentation. Very simple. You go and utilize the net price calculators, most of which are on the College Board site. Now, the benefit of the net price calculator is it's a little bit more in depth than the expected family calculators. The expected family calculators are essentially a broad number. It'll tell you what every school will look at you at based on your ability to pay. But that does not tell you how generous each individual school will or will not be towards you. The net price calculators, however, do that. Each school at this point in time has a net price calculator. So I emphasize parents, especially the ones considering with their students early decision or restricted early action, to utilize the net price calculators, most of which are on the College Board site, to utilize to figure out, does doing early decision financially make sense for us? Or doing restricted early action make sense for us? Because the net price calculators will show you, based on the information you provide them financially, typically exactly what that college will give you in grant money, i.e. free money to help pay for the college education. In a lot of cases, it will also ask on the net price calculator forms, for a lot of the schools more than ever before, what the student's GPA is, SAT, ACTs, etc., because it's also going to look to see how much scholarship money it can provide you. So utilize the net price calculators. It's a great tool to focus on if you're considering early decision or restricted early action, and if financial aid or the cost of school is a big concern. That being said, let's talk about the family dynamic when it comes to the financial aid process. On the forms, it will ask you, on all the forms, FAFSA, CSS, etc., they will ask for the parent's marital status. The answers will range from married, remarried, same answer, to divorced or separated, also same answer for a lot of these forms, to widowed, to never married but living together, which is obviously a gray area because it's difficult for them to figure out if you are living together or not. That being said, let's talk about the divorced and separated scenarios. When it comes to the FAFSA form, if you are separated or divorced and you've been separated for at least 3 months, what happens on the FAFSA form is it will ask you which parent the student lives with 51% of the time or more. If you indicate the student lives with mom 51% of the time or more, then all dad's financial information for his income, his assets, etc., the questions are erased from the FAFSA form. They do not ask you that information for the calculation of your expected family contribution. However, if you are remarried, the stepfather, stepmother's information takes the place on the FAFSA for your student, good, bad, or indifferent. Even if you're married a week ago, their information takes the place. Now let's talk about the CSS profile, because this is different, and it's specifically different per school. Each school that uses CSS determines whether or not they want both parents' information, even if you are divorced or separated, which means in some cases, if both biological parents are divorced and you're both remarried, that technically means they want all 4 parents, biological parents and step parents, financial information, income, assets, etc. If you're uncertain if the school, number one, even needs a CSS, or if they do need it, if they require the non-custodial parents' information as well, please contact the school's financial aid office directly and ask them, do you require the CSS profile? And if yes, first, when do you require it by? And then second, do you require the non-custodial parent to fill out a CSS as well? Because if they do, that basically means you're each filling out over 400 questions separately. Now, neither one of you can see what the other person is writing or their answers or questions. So you need to be talking throughout this process. That being said, let's talk about the frequently made errors in this process of filling out financial aid forms. The biggest error I see every year, and I've been doing this close to 20 plus years now, number one error across the board is student or parents' first name, last name, social, or birthday. If you do not know the student's birthday, if you do not know your birthday, double check. Do not guess on the socials. You need to make sure the numbers are exactly the way they are on the Social Security cards. Also, no nicknames. If your name is Samuel, you put Samuel if it's on your Social Security card, not Sam. If it's Edward, you put Edward, not Ed. These are the big errors I see every year on these forms. Another big error I see a lot, especially nowadays, is that you have an older student who is living with you. Maybe they're 21 or 22 years old. Maybe they graduated a year or two. And you're filling out the forms and they're asking you about the individuals in the household. And you're wondering, do they count on the household? They're doing their own taxes, they're working, maybe they're making more than you, let's say. The reality is it doesn't matter if your student is your exemption or not on your taxes. If you have a child living with you, even if they're 21, 22, 23 years old, you still count them as part of the household. This is one of the biggest errors I see every year. The more people you have in the household, the lower your expected family contribution, the more space for you to receive financial assistance. Please make sure not to make this error, which happens all the time. That being said, let's talk about why in the beginning of part 1 of this presentation, I had indicated never look at the price tag of college in determining whether or not you should apply. The cost of the school in most cases, to be honest, is irrelevant. It does not matter what the school's cost is. What matters is how generous the university is and how low they can drop the cost for you. Here you have in front of you Cornell University, which is actually one of the most generous colleges out there. Now, the cost of Cornell, the cost of attendance, and by the way, the cost of attendance means the cost of everything: room, board, books, transportation to the college, tuition fees, the whole gambit. Let's say you fill out the financial aid forms, and this forms say you can pay $10,000. Subtract that out. You have what's known as a $67,043 need. You have a financial need to attend that institution of $67,043. Now, the benefit of Cornell is they're extremely generous, which means the school itself provides up to 100% of the student's need, something that does not happen often. The benefit here is that the form said you can pay $10,000. You are only paying $10,000. The rest will be given to you, a bulk, over $60,000 of it in grant money, money you are not paying back. Now, you might be wondering, well, I would love my student to go to Cornell or a school of that caliber, but they're not in the range. It does not matter. There are many schools that offer 80, 90, 100% of financial percentage met need. How do we find those colleges? How do I even know that Cornell is as generous? Very simple. You go on to College Board, which I had mentioned in part 1 of the series here of the presentation. On College Board, if you type in any school's name in the profile, on the search bar on the right, that college's specific profile pops up. On the profile, there is a financial aid section, which will show you all the same information. You'd be amazed how many colleges are extremely generous out there. Schools like Fairleigh Dickinson University, very generous. Susquehanna, extremely generous. Providence, Fairfield, Muhlenberg, Gettysburg. A lot of colleges out there that provide a ton of financial need assistance for students and parents. All you need to do to figure that out is do the homework. You can do this. It can be done. If you need help, you can contact us, but you can do this on your own. That being said, we do have a newsletter that goes out every month. If you need or want the newsletter, it specifically tells you what you need to do that specific month. Our newsletters are specific towards grade level. So if you want our newsletter, at the end of this presentation, I'll provide you with our email information. Just email us and say, Ed, I have a junior student or a sophomore student. I'd love the newsletter. Please send it to me. All I need is the grade level and your email, because we send it out every month telling you exactly what you need to do that specific month. Now, here are the websites we talked about between the 2-part series of the presentation. Obviously, the FAFSA form is very important. It's the beginning stages of all financial aid forms. However, the College Board site is a wealth of knowledge. It's not just utilized for the SATs or the APs or filling out the CSS. It's where families, specifically the parents, should be going and gathering as much college information on the admissions and the financial aid end as possible. For scholarship searches, FastWeb and FinAid are the 2 largest scholarship searches in the world. They're also free. These are 2 I like. They're very good. If you want to follow us, once everything, I guess, gets back to normal, we do about 80 or so high school presentations a year. If you want to see our presentation, all you need to do is follow us on Facebook by looking us up through Principia Prep. On there, we post different content of different things that are coming up, important information for families looking at the college process, either starting or in the mix, as well as every week we post which high schools we'll be speaking at. That being said, we also do have a partnership with Sallie Mae. It's one of our groups that actually helps our organization out a lot. If you are considering taking out student loans, which is something we talk about more in depth in our senior presentation, which will be on the YouTube channel shortly, if you wouldn't mind utilizing the link below, www.salliemae.com/smartoption/Principia Prep. By doing so, if you apply for Sallie Mae loan, it helps our organization out a lot, and we really would appreciate it. If you're looking at student loans, if you would consider Sallie Mae, it is somebody that helps our organization, our group, a lot year after year. And if you utilize our link, it helps us out even more. That being said, here is my contact information, or I guess the group's information. Once again, my name is Ed Zamora, one of the co-founders of Principia. If you need help, if you need assistance, we are here to help. Here is our email address. You can email us here if you have questions, or shoot us a call at the number below. Thank you so much for viewing our presentation. We appreciate it.